All right, let's go back on the record on State versus Loyd. Mr. Loyd's present with his attorneys. State Attorney's Office is present. Did you all complete the deposition?
Yes.
Any issues that I need to be aware of?
There are 3 issues.
Can't hear you. What?
There are 3 issues. Oh, 3 issues, Judge.
Which are?
All right, so the first issue is that he was provided the competency eval from Louise to consider. I object to him under the rule of competency. He's not allowed to use that in any form in his evaluation. There's a case actually from the Supreme Court, a death case from Miami, where the penalty phase was actually reversed because the state expert relied on information from the competency eval, so I'm moving to exclude that.
State, what's your response?
Dr. Prichard has been instructed, he understands he's not to refer to that at all.
Okay.
Explained in the deposition and limited to the fact that that expert reported she saw no psychosis, and that was the only thing he could gather from it, and he won't refer to that.
Okay.
The second issue is that Dr. Prichard was provided the statements of Mr. Loyd from the trial and the deposition of Ronald Stewart, which was taken prior to trial, and he viewed those two together in regards to discrepancies between the two. That's improper opinion testimony of him testifying.
Let me get this straight. Is Dr. Prichard intending on testifying as to who he thinks is telling the truth?
I certainly don't intend to ask any questions to which that would be your response to answer.
So why is he using the testimony of Ronald Stewart?
He didn't testify he was using it. In fact, I think he said he wasn't sure why he was given it. It just been forwarded to him. He reviewed it. He didn't change his opinion. He doesn't have any testimony based on it, or there's nothing there that is contributing to his ultimate conclusion in this case.
Okay.
And I asked him specifically, Judge, and he said that he was using that as a roadmap for discrepancies between my client's statement and Ronald Stewart's.
Well, I mean, Mr. Ridgway, are you arguing that he has a right to do that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. He's not allowed to use that.
And the final objection is he indicated that he reviewed my client's trial testimony for evidence of psychosis and found none. I would object that being testified to.
Mr. Ridgway, are you intending on first, let me establish, are you intending on, all right, any issues as to the video, State?
I haven't finished seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your Honor, this is the first time we've seen them apply objection at the moment without being able to at least pose the person who these are going to come out as. They appear to at least be cumulative. Curious as to the relevance of all 3. Representation of counsel with this legal basis established that the line. I'm concerned that this appears to be cumulative at best.
Mr. Lineman, I haven't seen him. I can hear a little bit. It sounds like Mr. Loyd's voice interacting with a small child.
It pretty well sums them up, Your Honor. I assume it would be his
Okay.
granddaughter.
Okay. I don't really have an issue with you showing videos of him playing with his granddaughter. I think the state's objection is that they're cumulative. That's the only thing I'm asking you to respond to. Do you have any other objections besides they're cumulative?
No, ma'am.
It's penalty phase. I'm going to let him show them. So, all right, I'll overrule the state's objection as to cumulative. Anything else we need to address, gentlemen? All right, let's bring the jury back in.
Jury Andrews?
State recognized presence of the jury.
Yes, ma'am.
Defense. All right, welcome back, folks. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Keana Loyd. Stand up here. Raise your right hand.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
You may inquire.
Have a seat, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
I am Keana Loyd, Markeith's daughter.
I'm showing you what's A1 for identification. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
What is that photograph?
It's a picture of me and Kalina and my dad. We went out to eat with my brother, Markeith.
All right, this will
Moving
be,
to evidence?
yeah, this will be admitted without objection as defense exhibit number, is it 16? $14? All right, defense exhibit number 14 for purposes of penalty phase.
May I publish it, Judge?
Yes, sir.
How old are you, ma'am?
I'm 25.
Who's pictured in the photograph?
From left to right, it's Kalina, my daughter. It's me in the middle, and then my dad.
How old is your daughter now?
She's 5.
Okay. How old was she when this picture was taken?
She was almost 1.
Do you know how old your parents were when you were born?
So my mom had just turned 16 and my dad had just turned 18.
And do you have a brother also?
I do. I have a brother from my dad and I have another brother from my mom.
Okay. And the brother from your dad, what's his name?
His name is Markeith. He's a
Okay,
junior.
Where is Markeith?
He's in a mental institution.
Do you remember your father being around when you were young?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the jury about that? What your memories are?
I thought my dad was rich. He always had a lot of money, and I was young, so I didn't know much of what was going on. I spent a lot of time with him because him and I, we just always been closer than my mom and I. And every time I would come over, he always had something for me. Anything I wanted, he would go get it, or he'll send his girlfriend at the time to go get it. Any jewelry, anything. Like, there was nothing that I needed that I didn't have. He just was like the greatest thing ever.
Did he show you love
Yeah, for sure.
and respect?
Yeah.
Okay. Did there, would he pick you up from daycare?
Yes, he did. He used to pick me up from daycare. Sometimes my mom would come, and sometimes my dad would come.
So did you have a cousin Ebony that also had a relationship with him?
Yes, so my cousin Ebony, she's my cousin on my mom's side, my mom's older sister. She and I were born almost 3 hours apart, so she and I are close. And she doesn't know her dad, so I always felt so bad for her because I felt like, she didn't have a dad, and I wanted her to see like what it was like for me. So I used to ask all the time, can Ebony come over? Can Ebony come? And one day she finally came, and we were on the back patio, and I remember exactly where he was living at the time. And I had 2 huge water guns, and we were playing with the water guns, and we were shooting birds that were out in the fields. And my dad, he walked by, and he was like, "What are you doing?" you can't shoot birds, and I didn't even know you can't do that, and we were just laughing, and we just had like a really good time.
How old were you when you went to prison?
I was 4.
And did you continue to communicate with him while he was in prison?
Yes, I did.
Did you go visit him?
Yes, I did.
And he was in prison most of your youth,
Yes.
till you were 20 or so?
Right.
Do you remember the day he came home?
Yeah, I do.
I'm showing you some other photographs. I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit AH. May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yeah.
And who's in that photograph?
That's my mom and my cousin Ebony that I was just talking about. She has a daughter that's a week younger than my daughter. Coincidentally, that's her. And then my dad.
And where is this picture taken?
It was at my daughter's first birthday party.
Okay, I move this into evidence, Judge.
Any objections? No objection. All right, this will be received without objection as Defense Exhibit number 15.
May I publish it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm showing you what's been marked as AG. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Who is that?
It's my dad and Kalina, my daughter.
I'll move AG into evidence.
Any objections?
There you are.
This will be received without objection as Defense Exhibit number 16 for purposes of the penalty phase.
Publish it.
Granted.
I'm showing you AF. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's another picture when we went out to eat. Kalina, myself, and my dad.
Move that into evidence.
Any objection?
There you are.
This will be received without objection as Defense Exhibit number 17.
Publish
All
it.
right, for purposes of the penalty phase, no object, or yeah, go ahead.
Right, showing you what's been marked as AE. You recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's Kalina, my daughter, and my dad.
Move that into evidence.
Any objections?
There you are.
This will be received without objection as Defense Exhibit number 18 for purpose of penalty phase.
Describe the relationship between Kalina and your dad since he's come home.
They're
Yes.
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
It's up.
I'm going to step away while you talk about that.
Their relationship is so funny. Their relationship is so genuine. They're like, I don't know, I feel like he likes her more than me. Like, he's just like, he loves her so much and she loves him so much. There's nothing you can tell her about him where she will not, no, not my granddad. Like, she just loves him. She's so defensive of him. She doesn't want him to know. Anytime she gets in trouble, she does not want him to know. All good things. She learns things. She's extremely smart. And she just wants to show him or tell him, or I can't wait until granddaddy calls so I can tell him this. Like, they just love each other. And it's a lot like how him and I were when I was her age.
And what kind of things do you guys do together?
Kalina and I?
And your father?
When do you mean when he?
When he's with you, what kind of things do you do?
He used to come to my house and pick us up, and we'll go out to eat. And it doesn't matter where. Even he doesn't eat meat, But it doesn't matter where we go, and he'll like figure out what it is he's gonna eat. Wherever we wanted to go, he'll come and take us. So it'll be the four of us. It'll be my brother, myself, my daughter, and him. Or sometimes he'll just come and just hang out with us. I have other siblings from my mom, and they all think of him as a dad. And he'll come and he'll joke around, even with my other brother, because my two brothers, they have a pretty good relationship. And he'll come and joke around with everybody, just keeping up with Kalina. Anything she needs, he always is, does she need anything? He'll go get it, whatever it was. If my mom needed anything, and my mom's extremely independent, so if he could ever help, he would try. And they joke around a lot, so it was always very, very funny. It was just so much love. Like, it was crazy because I've never been in the same room with my mom and my dad at the same time. It was crazy.
I'm showing you what's been marked as AD. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
Okay, who is that?
It's my daughter Kalina and my dad.
I move that into evidence and publish
Any
it.
objection?
No, Your Honor.
This will be received without objection as defense exhibit number 19, for purposes of penalty phase. Publish it. Thanks.
I'm just going to show Judge. I'm showing you what's been marked as AB and AC for identification purposes. Do you recognize those photos?
Yes.
Okay. Who's in those photos?
So this one, it's myself, my daughter Kalina, and my dad. And then in the other one, it's myself, my daughter Kalina, my dad, and my brother.
Can I move these into evidence? AB and AC?
All right, these will be received as 20 and 21 for the defense penalty phase.
I'll publish these, Judge.
Okay?
I will look on. I don't know if this is published. When your daughter was born, was she a preemie?
Yes, she was.
And your dad came to the hospital?
No, around that time, he had just gotten shanked in prison, and I hadn't heard from him. I didn't even know if so I was in the hospital for a month and a half pregnant. I had a really high-risk pregnancy, so I could not go anywhere. I was in the bed on monitors, so I did not know what was going on with my dad. I didn't know if he was okay or anything. Then I ended up having her an emergency cesarean, and she was not breathing, so she was on the CPAP, and she spent 2 weeks in the NICU. And when we came home, I went to the hospital around November, the end of November. We came home January 3rd, and my dad was out.
Okay. When he came out, did you guys have conversations about him wanting to have a baby?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He felt bad that he couldn't be there for us physically. And he wanted the chance to be able to do that. And he would talk about, just how bad he wanted to be there, and how he just wants another chance to be able to do that. Because now we're grown now, so there's not too much he can do. I do take a lot of advice from him, but that's if I choose to. He didn't get a chance to raise me.
Did you have an experience with some of the rantings that he were talking about when he got out of prison?
What do you mean by rantings?
About religion and some of the things he would say about religion, which you either agree or disagree with?
Okay, so there was only one time where he just pretty much, I don't remember verbatim what he said, but he described what it is, you know, that he believed. And I said what it was that I believed, and what we believe is not the same. And since that day, we don't talk about it. That's not the conversations that we have together at all.
Now, your brother was recently diagnosed schizophrenic
Right, he was.
and hospitalized.
He was.
And how old is your brother?
My brother is 21.
Now, there were some videos that you provided me, and we moved those videos into evidence and moved to publish.
Any objection?
They are.
Are you moving them in as a composite?
That's fine, Judge.
Okay. So this is composite exhibit number 21 for the defense, 3 videos. Is it
Do
22?
you want a separate
22.
video?
You had, all right, so it's 22, 23, and 24 for
All
the
right.
defense for penalty phase.
I move to publish those videos, Judge.
Granted.
I'm just having Mr. Marrero play those. I'm going to sit down while.
Sure.
I have a few questions before.
Okay.
That's fine.
It tastes what? It tastes so good. Look at her, she said it tastes so good. This bitch tastes so good. We are not eating deaf and it tastes so
I'm going
good.
to stop it.
And y'all continue what y'all doing.
It's not,
Yeah, I'm
it's not
trying.
actually playing, just the sound.
Sorry, Judge.
Can we just move the laptop in front of the jury, Judge, so we can save time and we don't have to?
It's
does
fine
the
by
state
me, as
mind?
long as, State, if you need to move to see it.
Ted, go over there and do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Murray. The jurors need to move to see it. Go ahead and do that. Everybody get into a position where you can see it, then let Mr. Marrero know so he can play it.
Next one, publish, yeah. There's 3 of them, Judge. He's going to publish them.
That's fine. For the record, he's publishing number 2. You publishing the 3rd one, Mr. Marrero?
Keana, why is your dad important to your daughter's life now?
He plays a huge role with her, especially when it comes to school. When it comes to things, well, for example, she had got in trouble in school. There's this little boy, he keeps pushing her. And you know, usually they say when little boys do that to girls, it's because they like them. And she just kept getting in trouble. And I was like, you know what, I'm telling Granddaddy. And she's just like, no, don't tell Granddaddy. And I told him. And she was so upset with me, but he gave her some advice that even me as a mom, I didn't think to say to her. And just from the way, I guess, that he sees things, and he pretty much told her, you know, you're the smartest one in your class, right? And she was like, yeah, I'm the smartest one. And he was like, well, the smart people, you know, they make smart choices, and smart choices are good choices. And he was like, and you're smart, right? And she was like, yeah. And he was like, so then you have to make good choices. And then he said, because when you make really good choices, one day you can become the president. And she said, I want to be the president. I want to be the president of the United States and America. And then he's like, well, yeah, you can do that, but you have to make good choices, or you can be a lawyer. And he said, and if you're a lawyer, then you can help your granddaddy. And she was like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer because I want to help you. And he told her, so you have to make good choices, because he was just explaining to her that when you don't make good choices, somebody's keeping track of it. So if you try to go be the president or be a lawyer, they're going to say, oh, no, Kalina cannot be the president because she got in trouble in class that day. And she just was like, oh, like she just was really, really listening to him. And I was just like, and I wish I would have recorded it, because I was like, I did not think to say it that way. And she didn't get in trouble for a while. Now she eventually, because she is 5, and it's small minor stuff that kids do anyway. But for a while, she's like, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to help granddaddy. I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to help granddaddy watch. And that was just like, it was just like, I don't even know how to describe like how that feels.
How important is he in your life?
He's very important to me. We don't have a lot of men in our family on either side, my dad's side or my mom's side. And just how much of an impact he is just amazing. Even with my siblings, he's helped my sister. My sister's on a full ride scholarship at UConn for track. He's contributed to that. With my brother, he was having a hard time with my mom. He stepped in as a man and had a conversation with him versus the way other men came at my brother. Just the respect that he has for people and how understanding he is. My dad helped me get through a lot of stuff when I was younger because he listened to me. I think that he knew that how I felt and how I was feeling I just think that how I was feeling, he felt at some point, and I don't know when, but it was just really hard to talk to my mom for a long time, and he just understood so much in where I was, and eventually he did help me and my mom get to a really good space. Like, my mom and I are in a really good space right now, and it has a lot to do with my dad.
Thank you, Keana. I have no further questions.
Cross.
No question.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're free to go.
Good right to the vote,
Call your next witness.
Judge, the defense would rest.
All right. State, you ready to go on your rebuttal?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the defense has rested. The state now has an opportunity for rebuttal. Call your first witness, please.
Greg Prichard. Yes, sir.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and nothing but the truth.
This one's.
May I inquire?
That's it.
State your name and spell your last name for the court reporter, please.
My name is Greg, G-R-E-G. Last name is Prichard, P-R-I-C-H-A-R-D.
And what is your occupation or profession?
I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Florida, and I am in forensic private practice.
And how long have you been doing that?
I was licensed in the state of Florida in 1996, so about 23 years.
Would you tell the jury your education and your experience that led up to your licensure in the state of Florida?
Sure. I graduated from the University of Florida with a bachelor's degree in psychology in 1989. I then did my graduate work at Forest Institute of Professional Psychology in Alabama, completed a master's degree in clinical psychology in 1992. I completed my coursework for my doctorate degree in 1993. One of the requirements in the state of Florida for getting a doctorate degree is you have to have an internship after you complete your academic work. So I did my internship at Florida State Hospital in Chattahoochee. My academic specialization was in assessment and diagnostics, so that's been my orientation since I was in graduate school. When I completed my internship in 1994, I received my doctorate degree. I graduated magna cum laude, received my doctorate degree. Florida State Hospital hired me after I completed my doctorate degree as a psychologist at the hospital. So I stayed there 7 years or so on various units. I worked on units for individuals with mental illnesses, individuals who were intellectually disabled, individuals who were sent by the courts to the hospital for rehabilitation. So in the 7 years that I was there, I was in 1 day a week of private practice. So I worked 4 10-hour days at the hospital. And then in 2001, I resigned from the hospital, and I've been in full-time forensic private practice since then.
And what does it mean by the term forensic?
Forensic is a forensic psychologist answers any kind of psychological question that occurs in the context of criminal proceedings. So we're called in to inform the trier of fact, either the jury or the judge, about psychological aspects of the particular case.
And how long have you been doing that?
23 years.
And during that time, have you ever testified either before a judge or a jury and given your opinion in that area?
Yes.
Any idea how many times?
I don't keep track of it specifically, but it's got to be close to 1,000 by now.
And have you ever testified in a death penalty proceeding before?
Yes.
Is your practice currently limited to forensic psychology?
Yes, 99% of what I do is forensic related. I live in a small community. Occasionally there'll be an emergency where somebody needs therapy and I'll provide it, but about 99% of what I do is forensic.
And can you approximate how much of that work is done for either the prosecution or for the defense?
That's another thing I do not keep track of, but I estimate approximately 60 to 70% would be for the state, approximately 30 to 40% for the defense.
And are you currently doing work in death penalty cases for the defense?
I am. I have currently at least 4 active cases where I've been hired, in capital cases where I've been hired by defense attorneys, approximately 5 active cases where I've been hired by state attorney.
And were you contacted and asked to become associated with this case?
Yes.
And what were you asked to do?
I was asked to review the case, review all the documentation that was available for review. I was asked to do an evaluation of Mr. Loyd face-to-face, and I was also asked to review any of the information that may come from defense experts and offer my own professional formalization of Mr. Loyd. In other words, diagnoses, any kind of major mental health issues, whether I agreed with the defense experts in their characterization of Mr. Loyd, etc.
And did you in fact interview the defendant?
I did.
And who was present when you interviewed him?
His attorney, Mr. Lenneman, was present.
And when did you do that interview?
I did it October 17th, which would have been last Thursday.
Is there a particular reason why you waited so late in the proceeding to interview him?
Yes, the reason is that the rules don't allow me as a state expert to have contact with a criminal defendant until they are prosecuted. So in this particular case, I understand he was prosecuted on Wednesday, so that allowed me to come down Thursday and do my evaluation of him.
Only after he'd been found guilty were you allowed to see him.
That's correct.
Similarly, were there portions of the defense expert's materials that you were not allowed to see until after that time?
That's correct. I had very limited information until after the trial was conducted and a guilty verdict was given, and then I had access to all of the information that I needed.
Would you tell the jury the material that you did review eventually and that you considered in coming to your conclusion about this case?
Sure. I reviewed Orange County Sheriff's Office investigative reports. I reviewed some Orlando Police Department supplementary investigative reports. I reviewed some information from Orlando Health Hospital medical records related to Mr. Loyd. I reviewed a number of depositions, including a deposition by Dr. Dunn, deposition by Dr. Maher, deposition by Dr. Sesta, deposition by Dr. Campbell, deposition by Mr. Ronald Stewart, the other individual that was injured in this case, a report by Dr. Sesta. I reviewed personal notes of the defense experts, Dr. Maher, Dr. Campbell, and Dr. Dunn. And I also reviewed the trial transcript that occurred in the guilt phase exclusively of Mr. Loyd's testimony.
Did you receive any testing results, tests that had been administered by any of the defense doctors?
I did, yes.
And what was that?
Well, Dr. Sesta produced a report and some results of testing, which was relevant to my analysis. There were some testing results from Dr. Sesta. As a neuropsychologist, I am not a neuropsychologist, so I don't use some of the tests that Dr. Sesta used. But there was one that I particularly had interest in. I also got some information from Dr. Campbell from some testing he did.
Now, the jury's heard some testimony that as to Dr. Sesta, that he sent you some material that you did not appear to have reviewed.
Yes.
Do you know what he would have sent you that you did not review?
Well, what he didn't send me is, it's called raw data, and all that is, for example, one of the instruments is an Mmpi. It's a 338-item true-false measure. So the raw data would have been a copy of that 338-item true-false measure. And he's correct, I did not see that.
And was there any particular reason why you didn't feel the need to review it?
Yeah, I mean, well, number one, I didn't have any issue with what was represented in his report about the results of the MMPI-2, but more importantly, he did send me a neuropsychological assessment summary, and this summary contained all the scores that I was interested in.
Now, you mentioned the MMPI. Are you familiar with that test?
I am.
You use that test in your practice?
I do.
Is it exclusively a forensic test?
No, it's a really, really comprehensive test. The first version of the MMPI came out in 1939, so it has been around that long. It is actually the most researched psychological assessment instrument. So it has multi-purposes. They're used for example, fitness of duty evaluations for police officers or military personnel. They're used in some medical contexts, people having surgery, things like that. Also used in the forensic context and many other contexts as well. Would
you ever make a diagnosis based solely on an MMPI score?
No, that's not what it's for. It's not for making a diagnosis. It is for informing a diagnosis. So in other words, when you do an evaluation, you can use the MMPI-2 RF or MMPI-2 to provide additional information in your formulation of a particular case.
I want to change the direction of this and ask you what is meant by the term psychotic.
Well, in the context of psychology, when we say psychotic, what we mean is the person has very serious mental health symptoms. In other words, when we say psychotic, we are saying that somebody is having a break from reality. They are not perceiving things as they are actually occurring. And it's severe. It's not something that happens over a 3-second period. It's generally something that lasts for weeks and potentially months, and because of that break from reality, those misperceptions, it impairs the person's ability to do okay. There's generally 3 psychotic symptoms that we look for in the clinical and forensic realm. The 3 psychotic symptoms are either delusions, hallucinations, or cognitive disorganization. So delusions meaning the person has a fixed false belief. They perceive something's going on, or they have a special relationship with somebody that isn't actually true. An example of a delusion might be that somebody thinks they have a romantic relationship with a famous person that isn't actually true. Hallucinations, another psychotic symptom, is generally auditory or visual, meaning auditory, people hear voices or people hear things that aren't actually there. Visual, they see things that aren't actually there. And then the third general psychotic symptom is cognitive disorganization. It means that the person can't keep their cognitions and their associations structured to the point that they can't communicate with people. It's too choppy and it's too hard to follow, and it doesn't have a point. When you see that continuing for somebody on a consistent basis over the course of time, it represents a psychotic symptom.
When you interviewed the defendant last Thursday, did you see any signs of psychosis while you were talking to him?
I did not. I paid very close attention to it. So I was with him for about 2 hours and 15 minutes and did a lot of the things likely that the other experts did. I got a history from him. I talked to him about many different aspects of his history. I let him talk about things he wanted to talk about. During that 2 hour and 15-minute period, I did not recognize any symptom that I would consider a psychotic symptom.
You're aware that some of the doctors that have examined Mr. Loyd have opined that he suffered from a delusional disorder. You aware of that?
I am.
Do you share that opinion?
No, I do not.
Would you explain to the jury why you do not think that he suffers from a delusional disorder?
Yes. So when we say delusional disorder, we are saying it is a psychotic spectrum illness. So a delusional disorder would represent psychosis, one of those 3 symptoms I described: delusions, hallucinations, or cognitive disorganization. So if somebody is described as having a delusional disorder, they are saying the person is psychotic. They are misperceiving the reality of their circumstances. When we talk about it's generally saying that the person is, in the context of this case, the person is paranoid to the point of being delusional, okay? So they're so paranoid, they believe that they're getting persecuted somehow. People are following them. People are poisoning their food. That would represent a delusional disorder where the paranoia is so extreme that it's in the psychotic level, okay? So keep in mind that when we talk about paranoia, it's on a spectrum. There's not just one paranoia, it's on a spectrum. So there's mild paranoia, there's moderate paranoia, and then there's severe paranoia. And the severe paranoia is what is representative of delusional disorder. So my position, after speaking with Mr. Loyd, after reviewing, I guess he testified about 3 to 4 hours in the guilt phase himself, so I read that transcript. After looking at many things in his history, my opinion is that he does have some paranoia, and I would describe it as cultural paranoia. I think that term has probably been described in here, where a person has some paranoia about specific culturally specific things. So I would say that Mr. Loyd has some cultural paranoia, but I would say it's mild to moderate. It's also not that uncommon, particularly among African American males, to have some cultural paranoia. And I would suggest that in reviewing all the things I reviewed and in talking to Mr. Loyd, there's no indication that paranoia is at a psychotic level, is at that extreme level of that spectrum. So I would say, yes, some paranoia. It's not psychotic paranoia.
Explain what's the difference between a personality disorder and a mental disorder?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest distinctions we have to make in the clinical, particularly the forensic realm. So the difference between a personality disorder and a mental disorder. So mental disorder is generally one of those serious mental illnesses, those serious mental illnesses that often require some form of medication to treat. It requires medication because it's neurochemically driven. Okay, so take, for example, bipolar disorder is a mental illness. It's neurochemically driven. The person does not have control over what their neurochemistry does. So people have symptoms who are bipolar because their neurochemistry gets out of whack, and the requirement is to medicate that person so that we can adjust their neurochemistry and then the symptoms go away. Conversely, when we talk about personality disorders, it's just that. It's not a condition that is controlled by neurochemistry. It's not a condition that can be treated with any kind of medications, because a personality disorder is simply just that. It's a disorder of character or personality in the individual. So he has these personality dynamics that cause some trouble for him when he's trying to get along in the world. So it's not a mental illness, neurochemistry, it's just some personality issues that make it difficult for the person to adapt.
Did you come to any kind of impression or conclusion as to whether the defendant suffers from, first of all, a mental illness?
Yeah, my impression is no, he doesn't. I mean, he's a 44-year-old man that has never been treated with any kind of medication. Now, we know that there was one instance in his juvenile years where he was admitted to some kind of psychiatric hospital. He indicated he went with his cousin and his mom wanted to go, and he was admitted there. I saw some reference in somebody's report or somebody's notes that he was offered medication and refused them. I don't know if that's true or not, but what I asked Mr. Loyd is, have you ever taken medications for any kind of mental health condition? And his answer was no, never in his life. So when you have assertions that somebody has these serious mental illnesses that usually only respond if the person is given medication, and in Mr. Loyd's case, you see absent anything like that for 44 years, that would suggest to me that it hasn't been recognized that Mr. Loyd has any kind of mental illness that requires any type of medication.
Did you determine whether or not he thought that he suffered from any kind of personality disorder?
Well, I think that's the driving force behind Mr. Loyd's difficulties in his life. Mr. Loyd's a smart guy. He's a good worker. He's had many jobs and held many jobs. He does a good job in a lot of areas. He goes, he's gone to a lot of clubs. He was security at a lot of clubs. He had a lot of girlfriends. So his interaction in the community wasn't bad. He was doing fine in some ways, but there were several things that, in terms of his personality, that kind of, if we trace it backwards, it kind of tripped him up throughout his life. So one of those things is just criminal conduct. Most of us don't get arrested. So when we see people who get repeatedly arrested, we call that criminal conduct. Often that's a product of some personality issues, where they're not willing to conform and not willing to follow the rules and laws that other people follow. The other kind of personality issue that I think is clear, it's been talked about by other experts. It was in, I think, Dr. Sesta's report about narcissism, right? I think he thought it was delusions, grandiose delusions, which would be psychotic. My position is he is narcissistic. He has, when we say narcissistic, we're talking about somebody who's really self-centered. They really have a high opinion of themselves. They're very self-assured. They're very strongly opinionated and independent. I see a lot of the narcissism and hear a lot of the narcissism when I hear Mr. Loyd speak. And thirdly, there is some paranoia, and again, it's cultural paranoia, okay? So I'll give you an example of what I mean. He grew up in this area, and in the context of, there was a lot of persecution, white on black, in the police force, in his neighborhood. It's not imagined. If it's imagined, that's what would make it a delusion. It's real. So he described when he was, 7 years old, when cops would come to their neighborhood, they were taught in the neighborhood to run away if cops come, because the cops are they're gonna hassle you or hurt you. All right, so he also described like watching Mississippi Burning and Roots and those things when he was young. So there was this really strongly ingrained cultural aspect with Mr. Loyd that, again, is not that uncommon in usually younger black males as they're coming up, where they have this mistrust for white society. So my opinion is that what's being described as paranoia, it is paranoia, but it's not delusional paranoia. It's cultural paranoia. He has very real reasons to feel that way. He has very real reasons when he watches these historical documentaries and movies about black people coming up, and he told me, he said, that's real stuff. This stuff happened. Okay, so he's right. This isn't a delusion. This is a paranoia because of his experiences in his particular culture.
Have you considered whether or not the defendant could be diagnosed as having PTSD?
I did consider that, yes.
What was your conclusion?
I would not agree with the diagnosis of PTSD for a couple of reasons. First, I guess the most important reason is PTSD is debilitating. This is a debilitating illness. Most of us have heard of PTSD as it applies to war veterans. That's the most famous characterization of a PTSD person. So the idea is these recurrent, you have to have a traumatic event, first of all. So the traumatic event in my example would be the war experience. And then when they come home from the war, they have these recurrent issues adapting because they have all these reminders of the war. It might be sounds, it might be people, it might be people of particular race. it triggers a panic response. So what we see in PTSD people is they tend to isolate, they avoid. That's the big critical issue, is they avoid. They don't want to place themselves in any position where they're going to re-experience a trauma. So what we often see is they'll stay home, they won't go to parties, they'll isolate. They're usually always medicated. So if you don't see that type of impairment, it's actually one of the diagnostic criteria of PTSD. It causes impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. So with Mr. Loyd, we don't see that impairment. We see him as a very good worker, socially very adept. Lots of friends, lots of people, go into clubs, go into strip clubs, work in security, delivering chicken. He's not an isolative kind of guy. So I would disagree with the diagnosis based on that. The other thing I considered is some of the other experts suggested that it was the kidnapping when he was a child that created the PTSD response. Certainly a kidnapping can create a PTSD response in some people, but if you look at the statistically the facts of PTSD, 50 to 60% of PTSD individuals, the PTSD resolves within 3 months of the trauma. So this isn't typically chronic for most people with PTSD. It's not always the case. Sometimes people have PTSD for 30, 40, 50 years, but those are the people that are typically exposed to the kind of trauma that's extreme, like in the military, Vietnam, things like that. So, did he have PTSD back when he experienced this kidnapping when he was a teenager? I have no idea, but I do not think any kind of PTSD issue is active now.
Thank you, Doctor. Have another
Yes, sir.
Cross.
Yes. So if I understand you correctly, and we'll talk more about this, you discounted Dr. Mayer's opinion, who's a psychiatrist. You're not a psychiatrist, right?
That's correct. I'm not a psychiatrist.
You discounted Dr. Sesta's opinion, who's a neuropsychologist. You're not a neuropsychologist, are you?
No, I'm not.
As a matter of fact, you're not even board certified.
Yeah, it's not anything I ever pursued.
Okay, as a matter of fact, what you do is you ride the circuit on the tails of prosecutors in death penalty cases and come in and give testimony trying to put people on death row. That's what you do 70% of the time, if not more. Isn't that right?
No, that's an extreme mischaracterization. My professional duty is to be objective and fair. It doesn't matter who hires me. I am hired to do an objective, fair job for the trier of fact, and that's what I do.
And you gave no objective tests in this case. Isn't that right, doctor? Not one.
Yeah, that's correct.
Dr. Sesta gave an objective test.
Yes.
And there was at least 2 tests you could have given. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I could have given a lot of tests.
Because your stick is to come in here without any support, because you practice it all the time. You do it here.
Sustain, rephrase.
The 2 weeks before this, you were really busy, weren't you, doctor?
Yeah, it's been longer than 2 weeks.
And you were riding the circuit, going from place to place, and even though you've been on this case for 2 years, when I met with you on Sunday, this past Sunday, besides the 2-hour and 15-minute interview that you did when I was present, you didn't spend more than another 3.5 hours on this material. Isn't that right?
Up until now?
No, I'm talking about Sunday. We'll get to that.
Oh, Sunday, okay. Sunday. Sunday, it was something like that. Probably, I think I said 4 to 6 hours in my deposition, something like
As
that.
a matter of fact, when you came in for deposition, you hadn't reviewed all the things that you wanted to review. And we had to take another deposition today. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And that's kind of your MO, isn't it, doctor? When you take notes, you don't put everything down on your notes. When you review material, you try to wait so you can get away with not being questioned about it, so you can come in here and say whatever you want to say without any support. Isn't that right?
Sustained.
And you're not truthful all the time. Isn't that right, doctor?
No, that's very untrue.
Okay. Did this gentleman here have a conversation with you from the time that Dr. Sade testified to the time that you testified, asking you or telling you that Dr. Sade said that he never sent the raw data to you and you never took it? Did you guys have a conversation?
Yes, lunchtime.
Isn't it true that you gave a statement under oath on Sunday when I asked you the following question on page 20, lines 5 and 6? Did you review Dr. Sade's raw data from the testing he gave? And your answer was yes. Isn't that what you said?
That's correct.
That wasn't truthful, was it, doctor?
I thought you were talking about this that was sent to me, this data summary.
You thought I was talking about what?
I thought you were talking about this data summary that was sent by Dr. Sade that has all the results of his test.
Well, isn't it your following answer that you gave? Are you qualified to review the material? And your answer was, I mean, some of it yes and some of it no. Like for example, the MMPI-2. Yes, I'm qualified to do that. But the neuropsychological instruments, I don't know. I'm not a neuropsychologist, so I'm not familiar with those instruments. Is that what you said?
That's true.
So you told me you reviewed the raw data for the MMPI-2, and that was not a truth.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about this. It wasn't anything misleading or deliberate. I thought you were talking about this that Dr. Sade provided me.
Well, isn't it true that you didn't even ask Mr. Loyd anything about this kidnapping?
I did not ask him about the kidnapping, no.
As a matter of fact, when you go in and do your interview, you have a little shtick that you use where you try to figure out.
Sustained, Mr. Lenneman.
In this particular case, you were hired by the state. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And the value you have to the state is that you have to bring something to the game so you can get hired the next time. Isn't that right?
Value to the state is no, I'm honest, and I'll give them a straight answer.
Just like you gave me a straight answer with the data that you claimed that you reviewed.
I
right?
always try to, yes, that's my duty.
The MMPI-2 is a test that is designed to determine the mental state or psychotic position of an individual. Isn't that right?
I would describe it like this. MMPI-2 assesses, it assesses personality, it assesses symptoms, psychopathology in kind of a broad way.
It actually assesses psychopathology as the primary function. Isn't that right?
They're all overlapped, but yes, psychopathology meaning symptom manifestation, things like that, yes.
What is this, doctor?
I can't see it.
Have you ever seen that before?
Yeah, that is Dr. Sade's profile of the higher order scales on the MMPI-2RF.
And what does that say? What does that show?
Could you bring it here a little closer, please? It shows that there's two elevated scales. The highest scale is this RC6, which stands for persecution. That's the persecution scale. That is elevated beyond what you would expect, so it's beyond what is normal. The second most elevated scale is thought disorder that you see over here. So these two scales are the most elevated, which are the significant ones in terms of result of the MMPI-2. There's one more that's elevated, that's cynicism. It's not elevated very much. So the two key scales are the thought disorder and the persecution.
And would it be fair to say, doctor, isn't it true that you never even looked at the raw data that supports this information?
Yeah, the raw data being the yes and no bubble sheet I didn't need. That's what I need right there, so that's what I looked at.
But you didn't look at the raw data.
I don't need to look at the raw data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then why did you tell me you did?
I thought you were referring to this page that has all the scores on it.
You are not a neuropsychologist, is that correct?
That's correct.
You're not a trauma specialist, is that correct?
I am not a trauma specialist. That's correct.
And when you came when we took your depo on Sunday, one of the things I asked you was about the issue of paranoia. And your response was that you see a lot of personal experience with young blacks and paranoia. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And at the time, you had, I think, including this, you had at least 2 death penalty cases with Mr. King's office. Is that right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
A total of 3 or 4 cases with them. Is that right?
Yes.
And you have a total of 6 death penalty cases total with prosecutors around the state where you're working on their behalf as a rebuttal witness. Isn't that right?
Correct.
That's what you do. You come in and rebut.
Yes. That is often what I do.
And one of the things that you have mastered, doctor, is that you try to shift away from the psychological realm to the personality realm so you can say or provide ammunition for the state of Florida to say, hey, this was a personality thing. It's personal responsibility. It's not mental illness. That's what you do, doctor, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think what I do is provide a thorough evaluation and construct an opinion based on all the person's history, based on what I see in the evaluation. Very often there are personality issues that get in the way and create difficulty in people's lives. And I'm going to speak about it honestly. I always do. If I think anything else is present, of course, I would say that too.
When you were speaking with him at the jail, he was telling you a lot of things about his opinions on the treatment of blacks. Isn't that right?
He was, yes.
He told you that they would hang us from the trees. Is that right?
Well, that was part of it. He said they used to hang us from the trees and now they're hanging us just a different way. So, yeah.
And he talked about the system.
Yes, I would say the system is, he equates that to white society, basically.
And killing us for hundreds of years.
Yes.
Acting it's not like real, and mothers and fathers and burning down their house, and law enforcement doing it.
Yes.
And it went on and on and on and on.
Yes.
Is that right?
Are
You
you?
took notes of all that.
Yes,
And I was present, taking notes with you.
you were.
And even though you didn't ask him about the kidnapping, you discounted everything that the experts said in their depo and their reports and their notes about what they believe about the kidnapping and those facts. Is that right?
No, I didn't discount everything that was said. That's ridiculous. In fact, I think that Dr. Sesta's paranoia and grandiose stuff is accurate. The way we disagree is the severity of it. Psychotic, delusional versus what I think, which is personality stuff. So there's a lot I agree with. In the kidnapping stuff, yeah, I read about it. I don't disagree with it.
What did you say? Personality stuff?
Yes.
So he says mental illness, psychosis, which encompasses any personality, because personality is going to be included in that. Isn't that true, doctor?
No.
So you disagree with Dr. Sesta?
Well, I do, of course, disagree with some things that Dr. Sesta said, but we're not too far off. I'm a little further off probably with some of the other evaluators.
And of course you know, because you read the transcripts from Mr. Loyd, that the robberies that he was a victim of occurred within a month period or so of this event. Isn't that right?
Yes, the robbery in his capacity working delivering chicken, yes.
And it was your testimony, although Dr. Sesta and Dr. Campbell disagree with you, that post-traumatic stress, for the most part, resolves itself within 3 to 6 months. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Judge.
Redirect.
Oh, one other question. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yes, sir.
When he did come to see you, did you ask him about some information, or did he volunteer some information that he had just found out during the trial that was bothering him?
Yes.
What was that?
The information that was that Miss Dixon and his baby was a boy, and he had just found that out.
Okay.
Redirect.
Doctor, Mr. Lemon asked you questions about the number of cases you were working with our office.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about one of those cases.
Okay.
You're involved in a case involving a defendant named Mario Williams.
Yes.
In fact, Mr. Buxton is one of the prosecutors in that case.
Yes.
And you're retained by our office.
I was.
Did you examine the defendant in that case?
I did.
Did you render an opinion in that case?
I did.
To whom did that opinion wind up being helpful?
It was helpful to Mr. Williams, not to the state.
And in fact, because of that opinion, the death penalty was abandoned as a possible penalty in that case.
That's correct.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
All right, may this witness be excused? Thank you, doctor. You are free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State, have any other rebuttal witnesses?
No, ma'am.
Let me see the attorney. I'm sorry?
State witness, vote.
No, thank you. Let me see the attorneys at sidebar. That white noise has to be the most annoying sound in the world, isn't it? No. We were over there just talking about the schedule. As much as I would like to say that we can finish everything today, it's not really realistic. We have to do the jury instructions and the verdict forms for the county case. Both sides have now rested their evidence, so there is no more evidence for you to listen to. But realistically speaking, it would be 6 o'clock before we could get the case to you, closings, all of it. Which means that the one thing we don't want you to do in any of these cases is rush and be tired after the end of a long day. So I'm making the decision that I'm going to send you back to the hotel early today. We're going to finish everything up 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, instructions, closings, hand you the verdict forms for you all to make your decision on this, and you will be done as soon as your verdict is in. So that's it for this trial in terms of evidence. Have a good evening at the hotel, because remember the rules. No talking about the case, no looking up anything. Try to have a nice evening and nice dinner, and I will see you all promptly at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for closing. All right, why don't you all take a 15-minute break, then we're going to do charge conference. I don't think this should be a particularly long charge conference, but we'll talk about the verdict forms and the jury instructions. 15 minutes. Mr. Loyd, does your client want to be present for charge conference? Mr. Loyd, he waived last time, so I'll let you chat with him and find out